Eyes wide open. We are heading deep into the Appalachian Mountains, one of the most active and haunted regions in the United States. The paranormal in Appalachia is far more real than most people realize. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's take a look.
In early Appalachia, houses were built from old-growth timber, trees that had lived for centuries. Many believed these trees already held the spirit of the land, and once they were shaped into a home, they began absorbing the lives of the inhabitants. This is why many people feel that old houses breathe or have a presence that's nearly human. There's a concept called stone tape theory. It suggests that materials like stone, brick, and even wood can record the emotional energy of a moment like magnetic tape. Intense emotions or traumatic events can be imprinted on the physical fabric of the building. Under certain conditions, these recordings replay, which is how many explain residual hauntings as historical recordings rather than spirits. Ghosts that seem to be stuck in a loop and don't interact with the living.
Let's you and I take a ride into the night, where the truth is stranger and scarier than fiction. I thought I'd share some more instances, because it seems like when I was growing up, between the ages of 6 to about 12, it seemed like every single house we lived in, there was something going on there, just something that didn't seem right. A lot of strange things happened. I remember the way our house was set up in that lumber camp. We had 2 bedrooms and a walk-in closet between them. My mom and dad had 1 bedroom and my brother and I had the other. Now, for some reason, I was always scared to death of that walk-in closet. I don't know. I just got weird vibes about it. And I'd have nightmares at times of the door opening on that closet and this old woman walking out with long, stringy gray hair and long fingernails. I'd wake up in a cold sweat. Now, that went on for quite a while. We moved out of that house. We finally moved out of it. And I was telling my mom about the dreams that I had there. And I noticed she got a funny look on her face. She said, "Tracy, I've got to tell you this. I didn't tell you boys when we lived there, but," she said, "since you've brought this up, let me tell you this." She had an old wringer-type washer that she washed clothes with. And the way she'd work it, she'd pull the washing machine up to the bathtub and wring the clothes through the wringer into the bathtub to rinse, and then get the clothes out and take them out on a clothesline and hang them. And she said one day while we were all at school, Dad was at work, she was at home by herself doing the laundry. She had been over the bathtub to get the clothes out of the tub and felt a presence behind her. And she said she turned around, and there at that closet door, she said, "I swear there was a woman standing there." Well, that brings chills on me even to this day.
The Appalachian Mountains are one of the scariest places on Earth, and not because of the wildlife or getting lost, it's because of the things people don't talk about. The locals in deep Appalachian communities live by certain unspoken rules, and once you hear them, you'll understand why. They'll tell you never to whistle at night, not even once. Whistling is said to attract things, not animals, but something else. Things that listen and mimic and come closer each time they hear you. If you hear someone crying deep in the woods, especially a child, you don't go toward the sound. That's not a kid. That's something pretending to be one. And if you see someone you know, a friend, a relative, even a parent, standing outside your house after dark, calling your name, you don't open the door. You don't speak to them, because it might look like them, sound like them, but it's not them. It's something else wearing their voice like a mask. People who grow up in the mountains follow these rules without questioning them. They've seen what happens when someone doesn't. And if you ever find yourself deep in Appalachian territory, just remember, if something feels off, it probably is.
Growing up in Appalachia, we have no shortage of ghost stories. So here's one that happened to me and my mother back when I was about 11 years old. So growing up in this house that I spent about 7 years of my childhood in, we had an experience where a man had actually hung himself before we moved in. So we had reoccurring things that happened, such as our dog stopping in the exact spot where he hung himself, and their hair would stand up and they would growl looking up, like they'd be looking at where his body would have been as it was hanging. And their hair would just stand up, and they would do this about once a week, once every other week, and it would last for 5 or 6 minutes. That's just the background of this house. And that's enough to just pretty much end the story right there. But we talk about mimic behaviors and stuff on here, and how things tend to try to mimic things that they might think your loved ones would do to get your attention. Because if you know about like supernatural entities, when you show them attention, they gain power and gain a hold on you. So if you're ignoring the things they're doing, they might want to try to trick you into showing them that attention. So my brother at the time, he's 9 years younger than me, so he'd have only been a couple years old at this time. And he used to hold his blanket and he would suck his thumb, and he would do this like huff and puff noise. It's hard to describe, but it would just be like when he would suck his thumb. And there was a morning where he had already gone to daycare. I think he was at daycare, and my mom had came back, and I was like sick that day. I was staying at home. So it was just me and my mom in the house, and she was in bed still. Anyhow, she was laying there, and she was kind of in that state where you're like kind of awake, kind of not. And she feels a very distinct tapping on her shoulder, and she was laying, with her back towards the room, and, she was facing the wall. She heard felt this distinct tapping. And she just kind of like got wide-eyed, because she knew that she didn't hear anybody open her bedroom door. She knew that she didn't hear anybody walk over to the bed. Her bed was also kind of tall. So she knew that, he wouldn't be able to reach her easily. And I would have had to climb on the bed to actually reach her where she was at. So she's like kind of eerie, because she knows somebody just tapped her on the shoulder, and she laid there. She said a few seconds went by, and she feels it again, but this time it's a little bit harder. It was like a long, solid press, on her shoulder. And she just said at this point, she's wide awake and she's just freaked out. She does not want to roll over. And right in her ear, she just hears, and just like the little huff and puff my brother normally would do when he would suck his thumb. And so she rolls over like in a snap, like she just snaps over as fast as she can. And obviously there's nothing in this room. I'm getting cold chills talking about this. And this was like the same day, but that afternoon, after my mom came in, she'd asked me, she was like, "Hey, was that you? Did you come in there and then run out of the room?" She knows this can't be true. It can't happen, but she's wanting to reiterate. And, that afternoon, they had actually left me. I was a latchkey kid. A lot of the kids in the 90s were latchkey kids, and I was no different. And so they'd gone to work. Dad had gone to work. Mom was, I think she was going to college at this time, actually, finishing up her teaching degree. So I was home alone. And somebody's coming down the hallway. I can literally hear the footsteps coming down the hallway of my house. And I'm in my bedroom door, and I used to always keep my bedroom door locked when I was home alone, just in case somebody broke in or whatever. And I'm like hearing somebody's footsteps coming down the hall, and I know they're coming down this hallway. And then like the doorknob jiggles. To this day, it's like I blacked out. Like it was like an hour later, and then I was just like sitting on my couch. I had a couch in my bedroom. And I was just sitting on the couch, and I was like, what? Like I remembered it like it just happened a second ago, but when I looked at the clock, it was an hour past. That's an hour that I have lost entirely of my life. No idea why. And as I'm telling this story, my dogs are going nuts. It's a full moon tonight, and there's like some crashing in the woods back there, so we're signing out.
I live in the Appalachian Mountains, and if you don't know anything about Appalachia, unexplainable things happen here. Everywhere you move, some weird stuff's gonna happen. Like, I just moved out of my creepy old 1800s, used to be funeral home house, haunted house, and moved back to my creepy old haunted family land. I'm telling y'all this story before it gets dark outside because I am genuinely freaked out. Like a lot of Appalachians, I live in a holler, and my house is really close to my mom's house. Like, you could throw a rock from my back door and hit my mama's house. The other night at like 1 a.m., I was leaving my mom and dad's house. They were both already asleep and had been asleep for literally hours. I know everybody in this holler was asleep. Like, nobody was up. I know it was only me. But I get a few steps off of my mom's steps, and I start hearing whistling. So I start walking in the dark from my mom's house to my house, which, like I said, you can throw a rock and hit it. It's not a very far walk at all. I'm walking, I hear a whistle, and I try to pretend like I don't hear it, and I continue walking. And then I hear another whistle, but it sounds different. It doesn't sound like a bird, not that a bird would be whistling at 1 a.m. It almost sounded like somebody trying to whistle a song, and then the second time sounded more like, like the but long and drawn out and slow and super creepy sounding. I'm not a great whistler, but I'm going to try to show y'all how it sounded. So the first one was like, then the second one was like, remember, I live in rural Appalachia. There are no streetlights, so you literally can't even see your hand in front of your face. It gets so dark at night. I was using my flashlight, but it literally just lights up like right in front of you. Not sound like a bird. I tried to convince myself that it was my aunt or my uncle because it came from their yard or like their wood line, which is right beside my mom's house. So it was coming from like behind me as I was walking towards my house. There's always been weird, creepy stuff that happens here on this land, but I don't know. It seems like it just keeps getting worse. So living in Appalachia is not for the weak. Mom seems to think that it's the same thing that's been messing with her and pretending to be my dad. Imagine going outside after dark in Appalachia, knowing you're not supposed to, but you have no choice because you have to walk home. You know all the warnings and you know all the rules, such as don't whistle. If you hear something, no, you didn't. If you see something, no, you didn't. And then you hear something whistling at you numerous times. And like, not just like a normal whistle, not a bird whistle, not a human whistle. It was so eerie, like the hairs were standing up on my arms. I don't know how to describe it to you guys. It was so creepy.
Have you ever heard somebody say that everybody will meet a serial killer at least one time in their life? I don't know if that's true or not, but here's my story about how I think I actually did meet a serial killer. Forewarning, this is a little creepy and it's a bit of a long story. So back in 2019 to 2022, I did real estate photography, mainly in Cincinnati, but kind of all over Ohio. One day I got a call about a job where the realtor told me that the daughter of the homeowner who had passed was going to let me into this house because she had the keys. No big deal, very normal. So I show up to the house on my motorcycle because that's how I roll. But when I show up, it's not a woman waiting for me, it's a guy. He's a little bit short, kind of pudgy, balding on top. I said, "Hey, are you the person that's supposed to let me into the house?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Are you the husband of the woman that was supposed to let me in?" He says, "No, I'm a friend of the daughter whose mom lived in this house," which is very weird, but whatever, he had the keys. So we go inside, and this guy's giving me weird vibes immediately, but I chalk it up to maybe he's got a touch of the tism. I'm not going to judge him. Here's where the red flags start, though. When I started shooting, he kept walking closer and closer and closer to me, following me into every single room in the house. I repeatedly had to tell him to give me space so he wouldn't be in reflections and so he wouldn't bother me, but he wouldn't listen and kept getting closer and closer and closer. Now, I could have just packed up my stuff and left, or I could have finished shooting really quick so I could get paid, and I chose to finish shooting. So I rushed through all the photos and I tell him, "Hey, I'm done inside. I'm going to shoot outside the house, and then after that, I'll be out of your hair." But then he says, "You forgot about the basement here." I said, "I didn't know that there was a basement. Is it finished? Because we don't usually take photos unless it's a finished basement." And he says, "No, but I would like you to take photos of it anyways because my friend of the friend told me that she wants photos of the basement." I thought that was kind of weird, but whatever. I don't want to argue with this guy. I just want to get this stuff done. So I'll go down, take 30 seconds to take one photo of the basement, and then I will leave. He shows me where the basement is, and I start to walk down the stairs, and I hear him following directly behind me, like one step behind my foot. So I stop midway down and I turn around and say, Can you not follow me down here? Because I'm going to take one photo of the whole basement and I don't want you in the background. And he says, I would like to come in the basement as well. We don't move for a second. I'm staring at him, he's staring at me. We're both standing in the middle of this staircase and he has his hand behind his back. So I tell him, I'm not going to take photos of this basement. Please move out of the way. He moves, but he doesn't get out of the basement. He just slowly pushes himself up against the wall, so I have to walk right next to him to leave. So at this point, I figure this guy's either trying to rob me, or be romantic with me, and I don't want any three of those things to happen. So I push past him kind of quickly so he doesn't have time to react, and I grab my gear and I immediately walk outside. And he follows me and says, I would really like you to take a picture of the basement, please. And I said, no, I am not going to do that. And he gets really angry. He starts to shake a little bit. His fists are balled up. His brow is sweating slightly. His lips are pursed. But I don't care because I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. So I take a couple photos of the front of the house and I start packing up my gear to leave. He goes back inside. So I decide, whatever, I'm not going to talk to this guy anymore. It's not a big deal. As I'm packing up my stuff, I realize that I'm missing my lens cap. And no, I don't mean a lens cap like this. I mean one that's really big and looks like a thermos. It looks like this right here. It is not a small lens cap at all. It's about the size of a cup. I realize I left it inside the house somewhere, so I have to go back and talk to this guy. So I walk up to the house and I knock on the door and he answers immediately like he was waiting for me. But his demeanor is completely different. He's no longer angry. He's not frustrated. In fact, he's even nicer than he was when I first showed up. So I tell him, hey, I left my lens cap in here. Can I come in and just walk through really quick to see if I left it on a counter? And he goes, no problem. I know I'm going to find this immediately because it's a pretty big lens cap and this is an empty house with a couple tables, so it's not like it's lost in clutter or anything like that. But I don't find it. I looked in every single room, on top of tables, underneath tables, next to them. There was no lens cap in this house. Now, he stayed in the living room by the front door. He didn't follow me into any of these rooms. So I walk back to the living room and I say, hey, did you see this lens cap? It looks like this. I can't find it anywhere. He looks at me and he says, I think you might have left it in the basement. Nope, I didn't, because I didn't go down in the basement. I walked halfway down and I turned around and came right back up. I looked at him and I said, nope, I definitely didn't leave it in the basement. And he says, I think you left it in the basement. I didn't say a word to him. I turned around like I was still looking, walked out the back door, got on my motorcycle, and left. Here's the craziest thing about the entire situation. I get done shooting this place, I'm editing the photos, and I get a call from the realtor. They're like, hey, why didn't you shoot this house? This lady's waiting on you. Why didn't you show up? I said, what are you talking about? I'm looking at the photos that I just took right now. How is that possible? She said nobody showed up. She's been waiting on you. Well, she didn't let me in. It was the guy. It was her friend of the friend or whatever. Friend of a friend? What are you talking about? No one knew who this guy was. The homeowner's daughter was really confused. She's like, I didn't tell anybody to let you in. I didn't have a friend of a friend hold a key for you. What is going on right now? And they never found out who it was. To this day, no idea who let me in the house. By the way, there was a dismembered body found in Cincinnati in 2023, and a bunch of people speculated it was a serial killer, but Cincinnati keeps saying that's not the case.
I used to do house calls in the hills of the Appalachian Mountains. Many of my patients would live so far off the grid that I wouldn't have cell service, so I'd be navigating to their homes using a map and the compass in my car. The company that I used to work for does not exist anymore. It was dissolved, so I don't work for that company. I'll keep that in mind. One of my favorite things to do is antique. I love antique things. This is relevant to the story. The home I live in is over 100 years old. And as we have already gathered throughout my series, I tend to be very sensitive to paranormal things. Have been since I was a child. So I already know when something has kind of a weird thing to it. Sometimes I can even see it. This is pertinent to the story. My friend and I, who is also very paranormally sensitive, if that's what you call it, we had been going thrift shopping, right? I love thrifting, okay? And we also went to a couple of antique stores. Throughout the time we have been doing this, we have found some amazing things. I want to drop your name so bad, friend, but I didn't ask for your permission, so I'm not going to. So I'm just going to leave it as one of my friends. But at any rate, so me and her are antiquing one time, okay? And we actually find this beautiful, old school Ouija board. And you can tell the difference between a real Ouija board and a Ouija board that's made for mass production and decoration, because most decorative Ouija boards are missing a letter, or they're missing a yes, no. The whole alphabet is not there. It's not usable, okay? And generally people call that safe, or a decorative board, or it won't have a planchette with it because you can't really use it without the planchette. At least you're not supposed to. Just leave it alone, okay? So my friend and I find this Ouija board. It actually has a planchette with it. And she had said, oh no, I wonder what happened that someone went so far as to just give the board away with the planchette. You know, like what happened? And she was like, you know what we should do? And I was like, I know exactly what you're going to say, and I don't think we should do it. She's like, we should buy it. I did not participate. I was like, this is already a bad idea, but let's do it, right? So she buys it. She already lives in a home that has like she lives in a very old home, right? And there's actually a connecting area from her bedroom to the living room. It's kind of like a breezeway, and she had always said that she felt there was paranormal activity in there. I had never felt it, and that's fine. But she said as soon as she brought this Ouija board home, before she even did anything with it, she said that she was having an uptick in paranormal activity in the home. I'm not surprised. This Ouija board felt uncomfortable, gave me goosebumps, kind of made me feel uncomfortable. That's fine. It wasn't going home with me. It was going home with her. I made sure of that. I'm not taking this home. Okay, so she goes, you know what we should do? She said, I'm going to a table turning later in the month, and I'm going to take it to the table turning. Now, if you have never been to a table turning, sometimes they call it table tilting, kind of like just depends. Very similar to like a seance, except everyone's sitting at the table. Your hands are kind of like hovering over the table, and they call it a table turning. And very often the table will move. If you've not seen this, you should look it up. It's incredible. If you don't believe in energy fields, you should look it up. So she takes this board to the table turning, and she's like, yo, I don't know what's in this board. I don't know what they did with this board, but this board is, and I do not want to like keep it in my house long term, but I also don't want to try to destroy it or disrespect it in any way. I'm like, word. You can do whatever you want with it, except for bring it near me, right? In the time this is happening, her boyfriend breaks up with her, does her dirty. And I don't mean breaks up like, hey, I'm really sorry, things aren't working out. Like, I think we should just go our separate ways. No, she finds out that he is seeing somebody else, and that's how this thing implodes, right? And it's awful, awful. She's incredible. Why would you do that? Like, anywho, weeks go by, and I had asked her, because she hadn't brought up the paranormal activity or her ex or anything in a while. I'm like, so how are things? What's going on? I haven't talked to you in a few days. And she's like, I actually, two birds, one stone. I'm like, two birds, one stone, like, what is it? She's like, well, actually, when my ex cheated on me, he decided to go on, move in with this new girl, into their own place. I'm like, okay. She goes, and that Ouija board. I'm like, uh-huh. She's like, I went and took some contact paper. You know, that fake wooden contact paper that you put on like kitchen counters when you want to give them a false wood effect. She goes, I took some of that. I wrapped the Ouija board in it. I sealed it. And I gave it to them with a spatula and a whisk and a knife and told them it was a cutting board. I said, what? She said, oh yeah. She said, I disguised that Ouija board as a cutting board, and I sent it right on over to him. I had never heard of paranormal welfare in my whole life. So I was like, that's kind of weird, but you did get rid of the Ouija board. You did get rid of the Ouija board. This man's life fell apart faster than anything I had seen in my entire life, okay? Loses his job, loses his girl who he cheated on my friend with, gave him a disease that was not curable. And what we're not going to do is shame people, but what we will do is shame people for cheating. So it was his own fault going off with this little girl. Now you got a disease. We heard through the grapevine, okay? He lost his dog. This guy's entire life went to... So, the point of this story is Don't mess with that girl. Okay, I wish I could say her name. Don't mess with that girl. Number 2, you can disguise a Ouija board and regift it to ruin someone's life. Point number 2, you have free will. There is nothing keeping you from disguising a Ouija board and gifting it to someone and ruining their life. Is it morally wrong? I don't know. Did he deserve it? Yeah. And rule number 3, the girls or the women that are the most attractive really are the craziest. Like, if you looked at my friend, you would have no idea that that amount of crazy is behind those eyes. But I admire that. Incredible. Undoubtable. Incredible. Inspirational. I wonder if he kept the cutting board. I wonder if he still has it. She's such an inspiration.
Come on, baby. Yeah, let's go. We spots? Was that Dalmatian? Okay. You just wanted to be in the video. Say hey. Yeah, because what is that? Let's go inside. It sounds super far away, but like, no, what is that? Yo, come on. Come on, yo. You can't decide so fast. Yeah, I don't know what that was, but we in for the night.
I grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, and I used to date a girl who could see things. We decided once it would be a great idea to stay in a haunted hotel, so we drove to Jekyll Island, Georgia, and we stayed in the Jekyll Island Club Hotel, one of the oldest hotels in Georgia. I don't remember which building we stayed in, but we stayed on the top floor in this really old building in this really nice room. And I've had trouble sleeping since I left my grandmother's house. So I was having trouble sleeping, per usual, after I left my grandmother's house. And we were in our room, and I fell asleep finally. Well, I woke up at some point, and I looked over at her, and she was wide-eyed in the bed, staring at the ceiling. And I was like, what are you looking at? She said, you don't see it? No, I don't see what. There was something clinging to the ceiling in this hotel room, like what you would see in, what's that movie called? Insidious? It was like that. And I felt the energy. I can feel dark energy. I don't know if it's because I'm from the Appalachian Mountains and I've experienced these things, or if it's like a spiritual thing for me. I can feel it. She could see it. So it was like having eyes that you couldn't see through when I was with her, and it was such a creepy thing. And after several occurrences that were backed up by my grandmother, I started to actually believe her. So there are people that can truly see things that you can't see as a normal person. And being with that person in a haunted hotel room, and we're both from the Appalachian Mountains, so God knows what's following us around. I will not go back to the Jekyll Island Club Hotel.
The video I'm about to show you is very disturbing. I'm just going to let it play for you, and then I'll give you the background.
See? Lights go off. Now watch. You're going to see.
What you just saw was security footage that was sent to me by a woman who worked at a daycare in East Tennessee, Appalachia region. This daycare is actually a very old church that was turned into like a private daycare school. She said that events leading up to this, she was kind of having some weird experiences where she would be in her office after hours and would hear like people walking down the stairs, and then she would go check the stairwell and nobody would be there, or she would hear noises coming from classrooms and open up the door and see see nothing. She said she would be the only one on the property at this time because she was in charge of like opening the daycare center, and then she would often stay after hours. So nobody was in the building when she was hearing these noises. On this particular day, she was opening the daycare. She went in that door that you saw at the end of the hall and noticed there was an iPad laying on the ground. This was really odd to her because these iPads are put into this like cabinet area that are hooked on like chargers. And she said they're very secure and they're like sitting up on charging decks, if that makes sense. She thought maybe an intruder came in or something, so she immediately notified the security officer who came and checked the camera footage. And that is the camera footage that you saw. Literally, the way that iPad just flings out of that cabinet is giving me chills right now. In the beginning, I feel like I also saw some kind of an orb object, but I've watched this video so many times and I feel like it's just unexplainable.
I am so exhausted because I had the weirdest experience of my life last night. While sleeping in my tent, I woke up at 3:44 to some extremely loud music playing in the middle of the forest, like new age, XXYY with ZZ, I don't know how to say it, spiritual alien type stuff. And it was so loud. It was like a religious stadium had music playing at 3:44 in the morning or something. I don't know how to explain it. It went on for hours. And it freaked me the F out. I seriously was like, did I die? Like, what's going on? Go too far. I'm like really scared. So there's a few little Appalachian story times. We're going to start at the first one, which is from my little ancestors. So my great grandpa grew up really poor. Okay? So they rode mules everywhere. Okay? So, there's this mountain, and he's riding across it, him and his cousin on their mules. Important story time, fact here, my papa's mule was lazy, okay? The laziest mule ever. He said that it would not run, it wouldn't do nothing, he'd kick it as hard as he could, he'd whip it, it would not run, okay? This mule was stubborn. I guess that's where they get the saying, stubborn as a mule. I don't know. So they're riding their mules across this mountain. It is pitch black. They ain't got no way to see. Just the moonlight. They might have had a lantern, I don't know. But, a lantern ain't got that much light coming from it. Especially when you're outside. Anyways, besides the point. So they're riding and talking, and he said something jumps out of the tree that looks like a potato sack. Because, of course, that's the only thing that he really knew to compare it to. He said a potato or feed sack. If you live in Appalachia and you have an actual local feed store, then you know what those look like. Just little, literal burlap sacks. And he said that these sacks started running at them. He was terrified. But guess what? So was his mule. The hair on that mule's neck stood up, and that mule, for the first time in its life, ran. He said it never ran again till the day it died, but it did that day. Another story comes from the same great-grandpa and his wife, my grandma Betty Jo. Now, Betty Jo was a God-fearing woman, and so was my papa, so they didn't really believe in handsome boogers. But they did believe in demons, which is what they think this was. So my papa and my granny, they slept in separate beds because they loved each other, but sleeping, they got on each other's nerves. Papa snored too loud, granny hogged the covers, it just wasn't working out. So what did they do? They slept in separate beds, of course.
So this would happen 2 or 3 times, and on the same night every time. Papa would be asleep with his quilt pulled up just like y'all, and something would start dragging the covers off the end of the bed. And he'd pull it up and he'd scream, "Stop, stop!" And it wouldn't until he prayed it away. On the same nights that would happen, my granny would feel something jump up and off her bed. On and off, over and over. And she'd be too scared to turn around and look at it. And when she finally did, there's nothing there and the jumping would stop. Now, that's not a coincidence. I think not. Next story is about my grandma, who I call Sissat and Mom, Teresa. Now, Teresa don't believe in nothing. She thinks that she just believes in God. That is all. Kendall's back there laughing because she knows I'm right. God is the only thing this woman believes in. Anytime I talk about some hoodoo Appalachian Mountain magic, she's like, "That ain't real and you know it." Do I know it? No. So, my papa was working night shift, and she is a terrified woman. She'd fight for her children and grandchildren. This woman is tough, Appalachian strong, but she is a terrified woman. Okay? That's important. So, she gets all the kids, 3 kids, my uncles and my mom in bed, and she's laying there with her quilt pulled up too. And one of my uncles, they had just put a new door on, and the hole was there from the doorknob. And my uncle, one of them, said, "Mom, is Dad home?" She said no. Why? And he had to pull out the craziest sentence ever known to man. "Whose eye is that looking at us through the door hole then?" She got them kids up so fast and went to my granny and papa's. Valid. Now, this woman would go on while he was working night shift to wake up looking at the window, standing up looking at the window in the bedroom. One time she's standing over the kids in the bed. Crazy stuff. She still yet doesn't believe in anything weird. Okay. Now, the next story comes from yours truly. Now, some might blame this on a mental illness, but I don't think it was. So, whenever we first moved into this house, somebody died in it. Rest his soul. They were a real sweet couple. I don't think they'd ever do nothing to us. It's just like a presence in this house. Sweet little presence. But when we first moved in, I think they were agitated. So, I'm chilling in my bedroom, my little cozy, comfy bedroom, and I hear my mom and my sister and my sissat walk in. I hear the keys dangling. I hear, "Hi, puppies, hi, puppies." And my dog even perks up because she's sitting up here with me. And I was like, they must be home. I go downstairs and see their car pull in the driveway. They weren't home. The door was locked. So I asked them, "Did y'all come in here earlier?" Obviously, they said, "No, we just got home." This continues to happen multiple... Them freaking stink bugs. This continues to happen multiple times. Okay? And it's to the point now, like, I'll text whoever yelled at me and be like, "Did you yell at me?" The other day, actually, Kendall hollered at me from the bathroom, and it sounded like she yelled from me for the kitchen. And I was like, "Were you in the kitchen?" And she said, "No." I said, "Did you yell for me?" "No." "What do you mean, no? I know you did." Last story time, and I promise I'll let y'all go. I'm holding over like church. So, me and Kendall get home from a nice little time, and the doorknob to the garage goes, and opens up. No one's there. I grab Kendall so fast, grab a kitchen knife, and of course, I call my uncles. They come check the entire house. Even the upstairs under the beds, in the closets. We have a bunch of crawl spaces, Coraline type crawl spaces. Nothing. I was like, "No, there was something. You just can't see it because it don't want to be seen."
Since most of y'all found out I'm from Appalachia, I'll tell you one of the scariest stories that ever happened to me there. It was back when we were kids in Jackson County, Tennessee. This would have been over 20 years ago. We used to, all my cousins and me would get together at my grandparents' house, and we'd actually all have this big sleepover, and there'd be like 5 or 6 of us, and we loved it. And it was out in the middle of nowhere in a segment called Tick, Jackson County, Tennessee, which is part of Gainesboro. And we would play this game called hide and go seek in the dark in the basement. And this basement was like a semi-fully furnished basement. It had a kitchen, a bathroom, like a bedroom area. It had like this little small office in the back. And we'd play hide and go seek in the dark. because this basement was built into the hillside. So the glass windows on the side of the basement would actually let the moonlight in, and you could just barely make out the outlines of things in this basement. And we used to love getting together and getting scared and playing hide and go seek in the dark late at night after all the parents had gone to sleep. We were doing this like, any typical other thing. We were all between the ages like 10 and 13, except for our youngest cousin. And he was probably 7 or 8 at the time. And we were making him be the seeker. To be the seeker, you stood next to the light switch and you closed your eyes while the lights were on, while everybody hid, and you counted to like 60 or whatever, and everybody hid. Before you could open your eyes, the rule was you had to turn the light switch off, and then you could open your eyes. And then you had to, kind of navigate around this basement really slowly, trying to find each other, right? It was all fun. Well, I had laid down on the couch, and I'd put these pillows over me, and there's like a little hallway that led to this back office. And on the other side of the hallway, there was a freezer, and my other cousin had laid on top of that freezer, kind of like wedging himself behind it in the wall. So we're about 10 feet away from each other, and we both saw each other hide, so we'd been watching each other the whole time, so I could make out his silhouette. Well, then my little cousin, his name's Kyle, which, by the way, I'm related to the Bucks of Jackson County, if anybody's curious. Their last name's Buck. And I don't know if you heard that scream, that was wild. Anyhow, he walks by, and I can see his silhouette, his little boy silhouette. And I'm like, oh, I hope he doesn't see me. And his silhouette stops, and he's 3 feet away from me, and I can't tell if he's looking at me or my cousin, but I can tell he's looking at one of us, because his silhouette stopped, and I can tell by his shoulder stance, he's either looking right at me or my cousin. But I thought, okay, these pillows are over me, he probably actually doesn't see me. And he stood there for what seemed like 10, 15 seconds. I'm getting chills about this. And then he walks into that back office, and as soon as he walks into that back office, boom, all the lights came on. And I was like, oh, and I look in the back office, and he's not in there. He's at the light switch. He never left the light switch because he was so young, he was too scared to leave the light switch. So when he turned the light switch off, he just stood there until he thought that was an acceptable amount of time, and then turned the light switch back on. He was like, oh, I couldn't find anybody. And his brother was there. His name's Cody. Actually was like, dude, you never left the light switch. I saw your silhouette over by the light switch. And he didn't see what me and my other cousin Danny saw. He just saw that his little brother never left this light switch. And he was like, oh, you little chicken. And me and Danny are freaking out. Like, we're like, wow, like we're losing our minds. And we tell everybody what just happened. And we walk back to this office. And unanimously, all of us got this like just cold chill, like just like this like feel of dread and this cold chill. And we're like, oh, and we all freaked ourselves out. We slept with the lights on that night. I'm like shaking talking about this again, because I'm like, I haven't told this story like in so long, and I'm like reliving it right now. This is where it gets really hard. Obviously, I don't claim to be Native American. I don't. Okay, so listen to what I'm saying here. My wife is Native American. You guys know that. My adoptive great, like I guess uncle, his name was Carson, and he was a Cherokee Indian boy that was found tied to a tree with other Native American boys that had already died. No one knows why they were tied to that tree. They estimate he was somewhere between 2 and 3 years old. They adopted him into the family. We're talking, this is like late 1800s. This is a long time ago. We actually have like the old school photos of him because he was adopted into my family. He married into my family as he got older. And his branch of the family tree, they all are obviously Native American. Like you can tell by looking at them. I didn't get that. Okay. So I think it was one of those boys that was tied to that tree with him, and they were just playing with us. I think they were just playing, because my cousins are actually part of that branch of the family tree, and I think they were just playing with us, man. I think he was just wanting to join the game, and that is terrifying but comforting at the same time. Like, oh, and that house, there's a room in that house that's called the Indian room, and we call it that because when they excavated that house, they found like clay pottery. They found like clay pottery, and they found like arrowheads, and they found like all kinds of like artifacts. Actually, Nat Geographic came out there because there was an actual totem pole found on the property, and they actually took that totem, and it's actually in a museum. So like the area in this is in East Tennessee, was riddled with like Cherokee artifacts, and That's a tough one to relive out here in the dark. It's a pretty night, though. Okay, you all heard that. I am not walking back in on my own. I'm taking my monkey with me. What was that, Millie?
Was there a walker sighting in West Virginia? Well, I don't know for a fact that it was an actual walker, but it was a sighting of something, so let's get into this very true paranormal story. So one evening, Jess and her mom are out in a recently plowed field looking for arrowheads. So it's a completely plowed field with a barn in the middle. That is very important. Jess's mom loved to scare her, so she starts nudging her and she's like, "Look at the barn." And Jess is like, "Very funny. I'm not dealing with this right now." And the mom is very persistent. She's like, "No, please look at the barn," like almost frantic. So Jess turns and looks over and sees in the opening of the barn something with a very narrow white face peeping out from the darkness. So as soon as this thing moves, they move. They run back to the car, they drive back quickly to the house, and whenever they're coming up the driveway, Jess looks over and sees it in all its glory. Squatting down is a creature that looks almost human, the bottom half at least, but the top half is a deer, complete with the antlers. They park the car really quickly and run inside and shut all of the doors, shut all of the windows, lock everything, and just pray that it didn't follow them. Luckily, that's all that happened that night, but let's fast forward a bit. Later on, Jess's mom is outside refilling the chicken's water when something happens. She starts to smell rotten eggs, and we all know if you're really into like spiritual stuff, sulfur's not a good sign. And then she hears a stick break, and another. Is it getting closer? Something is charging at her. So she runs inside, gets her husband. Her husband comes outside, sees what he believes is a man, goes and gets something to defend them, and runs back out and sees this man moving in a way a human shouldn't be able to move. He declares, "That ain't right and that ain't human. Ignore it." And they go back inside. Since then, they will constantly hear whistling from the woods outside. So what do you think this was a sighting of? Remember, we're in Appalachia.
All the time, as well as... Okay, that was weird. What are the odds something just walks next to us? Okay, got it.
This girl said that her uncle was attacked in Appalachia by something they cannot figure out. So when Kelly was 17 years old, her and her family decided to take a trip during the summer. They were going to visit family that lived in Appalachia. She didn't want to go at the time because she got invited to go on a vacation with her boyfriend, but her mom made her go anyway, and they planned to stay for about 3.5 weeks, 24 days to be exact. So while she was on the plane, she felt like there was this man staring at her, and it was really making her feel uncomfortable. She was sitting by herself and her family was in the row behind her. She decides that she's just gonna ignore it. So they finish the flight, she gets off the flight, and they land in Charlotte Douglas, North Carolina. They then drive to their family's cabin where her grandmother and uncle are staying at the time. Now, she said that her family's cabin was in Hursonville, North Carolina, but I looked that up so that I would pronounce the word correctly, and I did not find a Hursonville, I found a Hendersonville, North Carolina. So I think that's what it is. Well, they get to the cabin and everything there is normal, and they spend the rest of the day relaxing. Well, the next morning, her and her sister want to go get snacks. So they drive to the store and they walk into the store and they're looking for their snacks, and she notices in one of the aisles that she sees a man, and he looks very familiar, and she realizes it's the same man from the plane. Now, this seemed like a very weird coincidence to her because if she remembers correctly, Hendersonville is about 2 to 2.5 hours away from Charlotte Douglas, North Carolina. But that's not even the weirdest part. A couple days later, her and her family, including her uncle, decide that they're going to stay home and make dinner. After they eat, they decide that they want to go on a hike because at the time her mom was very into flowers and gardening, and she wanted to go see the native nature there. As they're hiking, they see one other couple. They're about a mile and a half away from them, so they're essentially alone. Well, as she gets deeper into the trail, her and her family, they're about half a mile into the trail, she starts to get this really weird feeling. Now, she just decided that she was going to brush this off because she's always been very into nature, and she just wanted to admire the nature around her. But once they get about a mile in, at this point, the feeling is not going away. In fact, now it's getting stronger. Now, she notices that the deeper she gets into the forest, the feeling is just getting worse and worse. But they continue walking when suddenly they all hear something that startles them. It's this loud scream, and it sounds like it's coming from some type of man. And it sounds like it's coming from the right side of them in the forest, which doesn't make any sense because the trail is either in front of them or behind them. She said that although this did sound male, it did not sound human-like, and her family knew that something was trying to draw them deeper into the forest. So her family just starts to book it down the trail because they are scared at this point, and they run until they get to the parking lot. And when they get to the parking lot, they see the other couple. They ask the couple, like, hey, did you hear that scream? And the couple says yes, they heard it too. They're like, we need to get out of here. So they jump in the car and they start driving away. And she said that as soon as they left the forest, her headache just went away. So they keep driving and they get home. And when they get home, they ask their grandmother if she had ever encountered anything like that before because she had grown up there. Her grandmother told her never to follow that noise because every Appalachian resident knows if you hear something, no, you didn't. If you see something, no, you didn't. Well, they all decide that they're just going to go inside. They're going to hang out and go to bed. So they go inside. They all go to bed that night. And around 2:30, 2:35 in the morning, her uncle wakes up with a very itchy, sore back. Well, he's really tired at this point, and although it hurts, he decides that he's just going to go back to bed. So he just goes back to bed. Well, the next morning he wakes up and he decides that he's going to take a shower. He goes into the bathroom and he gets undressed and he realizes that there's no soap in the bathroom. So he wraps a towel around his waist and he walks out of the bathroom into the kitchen to go ask if there's any soap anywhere. And her mother looks at him and just gasps. There are 3 large, very deep scratch marks on her uncle's back, and they all know that they weren't there before because the night before they had all, after dinner, they had all went into the hot tub and he was in his swim trunks, and so they saw his back and he didn't have those scratch marks. So this happened in his sleep. The whole family at this point is freaked out. And these scratch marks were actually so bad that they had to take him to the ER to make sure that they weren't infected. They all jump in the car. They're driving to the ER. It takes about an hour to get there because of where they are. And they get to the ER. They get out of the car. His scratches are gone. Everyone in the family saw him walk into that kitchen and saw those scratch marks. They know that they were there, and they were bad enough for them to take him to the ER. To give us an idea of what these scratches looked like, she said that they were very wide and deep. And so whatever this was that did this to him was bigger than him. At this point, they're like, okay, we've had enough. They literally booked a flight out that very night. To this day, they have no idea where those scratches came from. And she wants to know if you guys think that man had anything to do with this situation. I have no idea. I think it's super strange that there was a man on that flight and then there's the same man in the aisle of that store, and that she was already weirded out about that man staring at her. Could have been like 2 separate weird instances, or it could have been connected. I have no idea. What do you guys think
about the Appalachian Mountains? I grew up in southern Appalachia in western North Carolina, 30 minutes outside of the town of Asheville. About a decade ago, I was in night school up at AB Tech, going to school for automotive mechanics. I would go into class at about 2 p.m. after I got off my part-time job, and I would end up getting home at about 10 p.m. depending on traffic. Every night I drove the same road in my old 1973 W200 Dodge pickup. Some nights it would get rather boring and I would take a different route, jump off I-40 and drive the back roads. As I jumped off of I-40 onto the exit where my parents live, the night seemed to get darker and none of the animals that I could hear through my rolled down windows made any more noise. The cab of my truck became smaller and smaller and my breathing quickened. I have never faced any kind of anxiety in my life, but at that moment something felt off and there was no way I could put my finger on what it was. I came to a stop at the exit ramp, turned to go down the road, and I happened to notice that the gas station off the exit where Mom and Dad lived had no lights on. They were a 24-hour truck stop and always had lights on, but I didn't think about it again after noticing. I just chalked it up to the power being out, but I could not shake that feeling that something was definitely askew. I slowly shifted through all of my old truck's gears, not wanting to make any more noise than an old pickup already did. I leaned over my steering wheel to look up at the moon through the windshield, and there were barely any stars visible, which was way out of the ordinary. As I rounded a particularly sharp left-hand curve and trucked through a straight stretch before the next right-hander, I looked at the ancient decaying barn I always gazed at when riding that stretch of road and thought about how long that thing had been here. For the split second that my gaze wandered, a very large, sickly-looking dog ran out in front of my truck, no more than 10 feet in front of me. Old Betsy was a good truck, but she didn't stop well. Thump thump, I heard the fence post I had left in my trunk bounce up out of my bed and then back into it as I slid to a stop. My first thought was, oh God, now I have to go tell these neighbors that I ran over their dog. That kind of thing doesn't go real far with people around here. It can really kind of set them off depending on the dog and the person. As I sat there breathing in the smell of burning rubber, something else found its way into my nose. The stench of rotten flesh. It's not a smell you ever forget once you smell it one time. I didn't pay much attention to it at the time. I just chalked it up to some rotten roadkill nearby. Finally, I thought to myself, let me go check and see whose this dog belongs to. I pushed my clutch in, shifted to reverse, and as I looked in my rearview mirror, illuminated by the haunting glow of my reverse lamps, was the same dog, only it wasn't on four legs anymore. It had stood up. Like a man well over 10 feet tall. Only then did it dawn on me that the front of my truck was every bit of 5 foot tall, and this dog was every bit of 5 foot tall at the shoulder on all fours. As it turned its head to look in the direction of my truck, I caught only a glimpse of this creature. It was not a dog, it was not a man, it was somewhere in between and at the same time entirely separate altogether. Its skin hung loose off its emaciated and thin frame like a raccoon, bits of matted fur and dirt and mud clung to its legs like a disease. The right arm seemed a little longer than the left, and they both hung abnormally low in relation to either animal this creature seemed to be. As it regained its senses, it turned and looked into the mirror like it knew exactly where I was sitting. The face was that of a man's, but the very edges of its face seemed to not be totally defined. They seemed to move and change like something you would see at a cellular level in a scientific documentary. There were no eyes, but only sockets where eyes should have been. No hair, and the skin that was dripping off its face was a cold, lifeless gray color. The nose was short and shoved into its face like a bulldog, but the teeth still haunt me. They seemed to fill and spill forth from the indefinable face, almost like they knew the horror they occupied and they were searching for a way out. It stared through my life, into my eyes, and past my soul. It seemed like an eternity, but could not have been more than 5 seconds that I sat there paralyzed. A light came on at the house next to the road, causing the creature to snap its gaze in that direction and tear off into the woods on its back 2 legs like a man. I jammed my old truck in first gear and roasted tires all the way through first, snatched second gear, and drove as fast as I could home. When I got to the house, both my parents were asleep. I went downstairs into my bedroom and loaded every firearm I possessed and locked all the doors. I couldn't wake them up. Who would believe that? And at 10:30 on a Thursday night. At about 3 a.m., I finally started to get drowsy, and as I went to lay my head down to get some sleep so I could still attempt to go hiking the next morning, I smelled the stench of death once again. It was faint at first, but it was definitely there. I thought to myself, you're just going crazy. None of that crap was real. But as I dwelt on it, it became more and more noticeable until it filled the entire basement. My dad has a home office in the basement with 2 large glass doors that face the woods. I woke up the courage to walk in my bedroom and into the basement living room with my tactical 12 gauge loaded and my flashlight. I shined the light through the glass doors, and at the edge of the woods, there stood the creature. It was motionless. It stared right into the light, unafraid, with those soulless eyes. I quickly covered my tactical light, ran into the living room, flipped on the outdoor floodlights, and into my surprise, it was no longer standing at the edge of the woods, but between the house and the edge of the woods, still motionless. I swung the door open and fired every round I had in its direction. I must have scored a couple hits because it screeched an unearthly scream, like that of a woman being slaughtered as it took off into the woods. The dogs went crazy. Mom and Dad woke up asking me what the crap I was doing. I told them that a bear had gotten into the trash and I was scaring it away. They didn't believe me, but I knew they wouldn't believe the truth either.
This is real footage filmed in the Appalachians.
I told you not to go there. That place is known as one of the most haunted on Earth, and it's not just talk. Locals have rules they follow to make it through the night. The Appalachian Mountains are a massive range in the US. Out there, even nature doesn't work the way it should. There are certain things you never do. If you hear someone call your name at night, don't respond. If you're alone and hear whistling, act like you didn't hear it and get out. When the sun goes down, lock everything. Doors, windows, blinds, and whatever you do, don't step outside. Whatever's out there, you do not want to meet it. People say paying attention to them is like inviting them into your life. And the stories? They're chilling. Exorcisms, people acting possessed, others who vanish and are found days later, confused deep in the forest. There are even rumors of hidden cannibalistic tribes living in the mountains, and yet people still live there.
Inside.
You alright?
What the absolute is it? Starting to regret that I stopped at this rest stop. And they say Bigfoot isn't real?
If you made it this far, thank you for exploring the paranormal side of Appalachia with me. These mountains hold centuries of secrets, and we're only scratching the surface. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another deep dive. And as always, stay safe, stay aware, and question everything.